What is the hope, and who's getting it right?
Well, look, I mean, there's two things that have happened over the last decade that are good. One, engineers have brought the price of renewable power down sharply. So solar power and wind power are the cheapest way to generate electricity on the planet, and we know how to use electricity to do the things that humans need to do. Left to itself, however, the economics won't begin to get us where we need to go because we have to go very, very fast. This is a timed test. As Sebastian said, the IPCC has told us that if we haven't cut emissions in half by 2030, then forget the Paris targets. So the other important development of the last 10 years, and the really hopeful thing, is that people have built a big, broad movement. 350 was one of the first iterations of this, but it's happily been joined by Sunrise Movement, Extinction Rebellion, the complete beauty of junior high and high school students in Fridays for the Future. Everybody knows Greta Thunberg, and they should. She's great. There's no one I like working with more. But she'd be the first to tell you that the most beautiful part is there are 10,000 Greta Thunbergs, and they have 10 million followers around the planet. They're doing unbelievable work, and it's precisely that consciousness raising that's brought us to the point, finally, even in the United States, where we're beginning to talk not about climate denial, but about climate action. It's not easy. The president is having a hell of a time even getting basic infrastructure bills through, but he's trying, and that momentum takes us towards Glasgow, with all the countries in the world hopefully feeling some of the same kinds of pressure. We're not going to stop global warming at this late date, obviously. What we're trying to do is stop it short of the place where it cuts civilization off at the knees. Even that is very much an open question, but if we can do it, it's thanks to those two groups of people, engineers and activists, each of whom have done the work that was set before them.
Yeah, and I think it's also really a matter of scaling the technology, because there is plenty of that technology out there. There are countries that are doing well. Costa Rica is essentially carbon neutral. We've got a lot of Scandinavian countries that are generating a lot of their energy from wind turbines at sea, of course. And I'm fond to say that when the U.S. sneezes, the rest of the world gets the flu. And getting out of a president who repudiated science and getting one who actually recognizes science as the force that it should be in informing us, in helping us project and model, and in doing so raising the alarm. So at this point, it seems like the momentum is building, and it's a good feeling to have the wind in our sails after essentially 4 years of acrimonious despair. But the work has just begun. I've just come back from the Green Tech festival in Berlin, where so many new technologies were on display. And I have to say that this is a very inspiring platform to be seeing the level of ingenuity, all the innovation that's going in. I mean, Audi just announced that by 2026, they'll stop making fuel and diesel vehicles. I think that these are big announcements. GM, of course, had announced that by 2035. These enormous companies that are committing to that. And I think with this Audi announcement, we can be pretty sure that other automotives will be coming on board sooner. But then there's the very exciting development in hydrogen fuel and what this can do both to ships, commercial ships, which are unfortunately just a necessity of the global economy, but we can do that with zero emissions. So I think that there's a lot of hope out there. There's certainly a movement, as Bill was saying, which is Fridays for the Future, Extinction Rebellion, Sunset Movement. 350 has absolutely been the godfather of this movement for decades, and it is definitely a time to be hopeful, a lot more so than it was a year ago. And particularly with COVID, I think we also recognize that we can actually collectively and globally take positions. The Paris Agreement is this sort of symbiotic seal that we have of approval for all countries that have signed. At this point, there's none who has not. So now it's just a matter of, metaphorically placing the foot on the accelerator.
Inge, I think you raised your hand earlier too. Yep.
No, I was just going to say I'm totally with Sebastian. I think there is a lot of hope to be had here. And when you just look back, even in 5 years, how much the discourse has changed, really, both business, political. I mean, it's in every news bulletin. It's so present. And so at least that awareness is certainly far, far greater than it's ever been. And I think the other hopeful thing is that we are realizing that this is a systems issue, and that we are beginning to join dots, which we hadn't done. Everything was done in silos. And now we're beginning to see the interdependence, the interconnectedness of everything. We're beginning to bring in biodiversity into the discourse. It's incredible that last COP was the first time they actually brought the oceans into the COP in any meaningful way. So I think that joining the dots is a really, really important one. And then I'm with Bill on, if any of you caught Mitzi Tan, one of our Arctic Angels earlier, I just think the quality and the consciousness of these young leaders is just quite remarkable. We have this network of young women leaders and activists, and it's not just knowledge that they've armed themselves with, but with a genuine desire and purpose and a generosity of spirit, which I find utterly inspiring. And I do think it has to be an intergenerational effort, though, because we hear too often that our hope lies with the young people, but it has to be intergenerational. And I do also think that the younger generations recognize that they are standing on the shoulders of people like Bill, who have spent years and years and years fighting this battle. And I do think that we're now at a turning point. And if we can make the wise decisions, it actually is going to be a very, very interesting and bright future.
I'm worried about sort of bringing the tone down, because of course there are reasons to be hopeful, but there are also reasons to be really worried. And frankly, that's because I'm just worried that we're just not going to act fast enough. There are all of these wonderful things happening, and young people absolutely are at the heart of that. And there's nothing more powerful than having a young person looking you in the eyes and absolutely saying, you are wrecking my future. That is immensely powerful, and all credit to everything that they've done. But at the same time, when I look what's happening here in the UK, we've got a government that's getting terribly good at waving targets around, but not actually putting the policies in place to deliver them. A government that's very good at being full of warm words and rhetoric, but again, continuing with business as usual when it comes to road building, aviation expansion, and so on. And I suppose I do worry that although everyone has now kind of learnt the language of climate action, if you like, the danger is it's quite difficult to work out what is greenwash and what is real. And I think that the real concern now is less about climate denial and more about climate delaying, because there is such a thing as being too late. And my feeling is that there's every chance that we will go down in history as the species that spent all its time monitoring its own extinction rather than taking action to take steps to avoid it. In terms of where else I find hope, I would point not just to young people, but also the kind of burgeoning movement of citizens' assemblies on climate change in particular, where you get a genuine representative cross-section of society together. And when you give them the objective science around climate change, then they are far more ambitious and bold in their policy proposals than anything that's coming out of government. And these are genuinely people, a genuine cross-section of people across the country. Some people who started that process didn't care about climate change at all. And now they're hugely motivated. So that's exciting, that when people are given that information, they are mobilizing to do something about it. And I guess finally, just to say, here in the UK, there's a movement that I'm involved in called the Climate and Ecological Emergency Alliance. It's putting forward a new climate bill for the UK. The same huge alliance of interests have come together behind it, including business and trade unions and MPs and others, basically trying to update our climate legislation here in the UK so that, for example, it would include consumption emissions linked to the products that we import. It's very easy for the UK to look as if we're reducing our emissions if essentially we've just outsourced all of our manufacturing to China. It does include aviation emissions, shipping emissions. It includes a citizens' assembly to guide politicians on the way forward. And crucially also it brings nature and climate together, because unless we tackle those two things together, we won't actually address either of them properly.